lesser ritual impurity and what nullifies ablution. فالحدث الأصغر ما ينقض الوضوء وهو كل ما خرج من السبيلين إلا ريح القبل في الأصح ونجاسة سائلة من غيرهما كدم وقيح والقيء إذا ملأ الفم وهو ما لا ينطبق عليه الفم إلا بتكلف ونوم لم تتمكن فيه المقعدة من الأرض وإغماء وجنون وسكر وقحقحة بالغ يقظان في صلاة ذات ركوع وسجود. The lesser ritual impurity is that which nullifies the ablution. It is number one, anything that exits the two passages, meaning the private front and back passage, with the exception of wind from the front passage according to the more correct opinion. Now someone may ask, how does wind come out from the front passage? We can understand wind coming out from the back passage. How does it come out from the front? When someone goes to the toilet to relieve themselves, when they relieve themselves of water, sometimes they may get up and later on when they move about, they may feel that some drops of urine may have come out. Later on when they check, they look and they find no drops of urine. This was because of some movement within the kidneys or the bladder, which was felt in the front private organ, but in reality there was no urine. So this does not invalidate the ablution. But if there is urine, then the urine will invalidate the ablution. So anything which comes out from the front and back passage. The emission of flowing impurity from other than them, meaning from other than the front and back, such as blood or pus. If someone bleeds in Hanafi school, in our school, if someone bleeds, the bleeding will invalidate the wudu, the ablution. How do you determine flowing blood? Meaning, blood comes out, how do you determine flowing blood? If someone has a wound, they get a tissue, they wipe the blood. If the blood resurfaces on the skin, this means that blood is what? Flowing. This is how you determine flowing blood. But if you wipe the blood and nothing reappears, then that blood was not flowing. So this is what is meant by flowing blood. Or if someone has a bloodshot in the eye, the bloodshot in the eye will not invalidate the wudu. Or if they have internal bleeding in the fingernail, this will not invalidate the wudu. So the way to determine flowing blood is wiping the blood with the tissue, and if the blood reappears, resurfaces on the skin, this means the blood is flowing, and this will invalidate the wudu ablution. Vomiting, if it fills the mouth, whereby the mouth is unable to close except with difficulty. Meaning, if a person vomits, but the vomit stays in the mouth and they swallow the vomit again, this will not invalidate the wudu. But if they are unable to keep the mouth closed, this means it was a mouthful of vomit. This will invalidate the wudu. Sleeping with one's posterior firmly seated on the ground, without one's posterior firmly seated on the ground. Now here, what is meant by this is if someone falls asleep, and they fall asleep in such a way that the posterior is off the ground, then by agreement the ablution is invalidated. But if the person sleeps with his posterior on the ground, his ablution is not invalidated. But there is one exception. That exception is if he is leaning against something and his sleep is so deep that if someone removed the thing that he was leaning on, he would fall to the ground. Meaning the sleep is so deep that if what he was leaning on was removed, he would fall to the ground. Then in such a case he must also perform ablution. But if he is asleep in such a way that he is leaning, but if someone were to remove what he was leaning on, he would be alert and awake, then his ablution is still valid. So sometimes in a coach journey, sometimes someone may fall asleep so deeply that if someone were to remove the seat, they would fall. In such a case, they must renew their ablution. And the author, Sheikh Abdul Ghani al-Ghunaymi al-Maydani rahimahullah, in his commentary on al-Quduri al-Lubab, he mentions that in our day and age, people should renew their ablution if they sit down and fall asleep, because people eat too much in his time, which was over 100 years ago. So you can imagine the state of people today. They eat too much, and therefore this will cause wind, and therefore out of precaution they should perform ablution.